Okay, so domestic abuse includes victims of physical, sexual, emotional, economic, and psychological abuse. So, some health concerns for this patient population would be depression, PTSD, sleep difficulties, eating disorders, attempted suicide, pain syndromes, poor overall health, substance use, risky sexual behavior, isolation, HIV and AIDS, HPV, genital herpes, chlamydia, gonorrhea, Hep B, and unintended pregnancies.
The culture and environment of media tends to normalize and romanticize domestic abuse. So examples of this can be Beauty and the Beast with the romance narrative, getting gifts and believing that your relationship can overcome any hardship, even if that includes abuse. Several other movies normalize domestic violence, such as Twilight and 50 Shades of Grey.
Some cultural environment, family, and peer support would be things like sexual violence is a serious problem that can have lasting harmful effects on victims and their family, friends, and communities. Some ideas to help with this issue would be teaching healthy, safe dating and intimate relationship skills to adolescents, improving school climate and safety, strengthen work-family support, social emotional learning programs for youth, and healthy relationship programs for couples.
On average, it takes a victim 7 times to leave an abusive relationship. Reasons victims stay or go back: they're fearful, it's normalized abuse, shame, intimidation, low self-esteem, lack of resources, disability, immigration status, children, love, and cultural reasons. Victims of domestic violence often receive judgment and questions regarding why they stay. Victims are often scared to leave, and they are scared of the physical abuse, and oftentimes there is psychological abuse causing fear of the consequences. If the victim grew up in a household where domestic abuse had taken place, they may not realize that they are in an abusive relationship. They may feel embarrassed that they are in an abusive relationship, causing them to stay and avoid addressing the problem. Victims may financially rely on their partner. Customs or beliefs may frown upon leaving them, marriage or relationship.
Some legal and political issues would be like weak community sanctions against perpetrators of sexual violence, weak laws and policies related to gender equality, and then the issue of restraining orders. So when somebody wants to get a restraining order, there are several steps that they have to do in order to get the restraining order, and they can last up to 3 years. It's a lengthy process, and before it's actually put into place, you can get what is a temporary restraining order, which I guess kind of protects the victim, but not always.
And then at any point, the perpetrator can take you to court to try and get the restraining order removed. So there's sometimes problems with that. Potential barriers: finances, access to a lawyer, lack of support from peers or family, lack of safety, lack of justice, lack of institutional support from police and the judicial system, general tolerance of sexual assault within the community. So oftentimes people think that sexual assault victims were asking for it or what they were wearing caused the rape, but that is not what we should be educating on.
So the cultural environment on an international scope: domestic abuse is a worldwide issue. It's not just statewide or national, it's all over the world. Custom and beliefs from the victim or the abuser may impact if a victim stays. Cultural abuse may be taking place to justify the abuse. And then around the world, rape and sexual abuse are everyday violent occurrences. So here in the U.S., it kind of is not at the forefront of our mind, but internationally, it is something that women and girls and even oftentimes men fear for on a daily basis.
Economic status. Globally, violence against women disproportionately affects low-income countries and regions. Disability affects more than 1 in 4 women and 1 in 5 men in the United States and has been associated with a greater risk of experiencing violence. Poverty and high unemployment rates increase the risk of intimate partner violence.
Some racial and ethnicity health disparities. 41.2% of black women reported experiencing domestic abuse by a partner during their lifetime. 19.6% of Asian or Pacific Islander women reported experiencing domestic abuse by a partner in their lifetime. And then 23.4% of Hispanic Latino women reported experiencing domestic abuse. 4.7 per 1,000 black African Americans had the highest rates of intimate partner violence compared to whites, which was 3.9 per 1,000, and Hispanics, that is 2.3 per 1,000. And then American Indians are twice as likely to experience rape, sexual assault compared to all races.
Religion. So cultural beliefs and religion can all have an impact on victims of domestic abuse. These can all play a role in the victim's decision to leave or stay in the abusive relationship. Native Americans and Alaska Natives face particularly high rates of domestic violence.
So gender does play a role in this patient population. Domestic abuse can have long-term impacts on physical and mental health in men and women. And because there are stereotypes that men are the perpetrators more often than the victims, there are not many effective resources available to them. And then 1 in 4 men have experienced sexual violence involving physical contact during their lifetime.
Geographical location. So telehealth can provide access to nurses trained in domestic abuse. Less populated areas have limited access to resources, and then there's increased judgment in small communities.
Some implicit bias for this patient population would be men can't be raped, domestic violence usually only happens in married couples, and it's easy to leave. And then some explicit bias would be victims provoke sexual assault by flirting, wearing sexy clothes, or getting drunk. False allegations of rape are common, and if they didn't struggle or fight back, then it wasn't sexual assault.
On an international scope, so statewide in Utah, 1 in 3 women experience domestic abuse or sexual assault. Nationally, in the United States, 10 million adults experience domestic abuse annually. 1 in 4 women and 1 in 10 men experience a form of domestic abuse. Internationally, 1 in 3 women have been victims of domestic abuse.